The Montana wilderness was a jagged landscape of ice and iron gray rock, dominated by the Eagle
Package
Ridge
secure, moving out.
tactical
It's active. Data flow
This
confirmed.
wasn't a
Copy.
school
Covering
for
flanks.
kids.
Push to
It
extraction.
was a
State contact
private,
possible ahead.
high-stakes training ground for the sons of the global elite. Young billionaires who wanted to play soldier without ever stepping onto a real battlefield. The academy was run by Commander Sterling, a man whose chest was covered in medals he had mostly bought with corporate bribes. Into this atmosphere of toxic arrogance walked a woman who called herself Ruth. She was a quiet, middle-aged woman with a permanent slouch, wearing a heavy, grease-stained parka and carrying a mop bucket. She had been hired as a general maintenance and sanitation worker. Her days were spent scrubbing the muddy floors of the tactical rooms and cleaning the vomit of rich cadets who couldn't handle the high-altitude training. To the cadets and the instructors at Eagle Ridge, Ruth was a ghost with a name tag. She was the mop lady who stayed in the shadows. Commander Sterling's lead instructor, a man named Brock who looked like he had been carved out of granite and ego, made Ruth his primary target for entertainment. Brock would intentionally throw his muddy boots into her cleaning bucket or trip her in the cafeteria, laughing as she scrambled to pick up the scattered silverware. He would mock her poverty, telling the cadets that people like Ruth were the chaff of society, only fit to serve men of high caliber like themselves. He once forced her to hand-scrub the entire gravel courtyard in a freezing rainstorm because he claimed he saw a speck of dirt from his office window. Ruth never said a word. She never looked up. She simply took the abuse with a hollow stare that Brock mistook for a broken spirit. What Brock and the elite warriors of Eagle Ridge didn't know was that Ruth was actually Major Ruth Fury Vance, a former Tier 1 operator and the first woman to ever lead a clandestine unit within the CIA's Special Activities Center. She was a legend in the world of shadows, a woman who had dismantled entire cartels with nothing but a wire and a whisper. She wasn't at the academy for a paycheck. She was there because a shipment of ghost tech, untraceable, high-grade surveillance hardware, had been stolen from a government facility and tracked to Sterling's private vault. Ruth had spent 2 months playing the nobody, her cleaning cart actually containing a high-powered signal jammer and a series of micro-explosives hidden inside bottles of floor wax. She had mapped the Academy's thermal weak points and identified the exact frequency of their biometric security grid. The tension reached its breaking point on a night when the temperature dropped to 20 below zero. A young cadet named Leo, who was the only one at the Academy with a shred of decency, had accidentally overheard Sterling discussing the sale of the stolen tech to a foreign extremist group. Brock caught the boy trying to call his father and dragged him into the center of the training hall. In front of the entire staff, Brock began to systematically humiliate and beat the boy, telling him that snitches don't survive the ridge. Ruth was mopping the far corner of the room, her back to the crowd. Brock saw her and, in a fit of sadistic rage, told her to bring him her heavy industrial mop handle. He intended to use it to break the boy's ribs. He called out, "Hey, mop girl, bring that over here and watch how a real man handles a traitor." Ruth didn't move at first. The room went silent, the only sound being the wind howling against the reinforced glass. Then, she slowly stood up straight. The slouch disappeared, and her shoulders broadened with a terrifying authority. She turned around, and for the first time, the cadets saw her eyes. They weren't the eyes of a janitor. They were the cold, calculating eyes of a reaper. She walked toward the center of the room, but she didn't bring the mop handle. She looked Brock in the eye and told him, in a voice that sounded like grinding tectonic plates, to let the boy go. The room erupted in laughter, but the laughter died quickly when Ruth delivered a single, blindingly fast palm strike to Brock's chest. The air left his lungs in a sickening gasp as he was lifted off his feet and slammed into the concrete floor. The mop lady mask was gone. Ruth pulled a hidden tactical radio from her belt and spoke a single word, blackout. Instantly, the entire Eagle Ridge Academy was plunged into total darkness. The high-tech security gates slammed shut, and the backup generators were silenced by the microcharges she had planted weeks ago. Ruth put on a pair of low-profile night vision goggles and moved through the room like a shadow come to life. In the darkness, the elite warriors were children. They fired blindly into the dark, hitting nothing but air. Ruth didn't need a gun. She used the environment. She dismantled the instructors with a mixture of brutal efficiency and psychological pressure. Every time they thought they had her, she would disappear, only to strike from the rafters or the service vents. Commander Sterling, realizing his fortress had been compromised, fled toward his private vault, clutching the ghost tech drives. He reached the heavy steel door, thinking he was safe, but the door was already open. Ruth was waiting for him, sitting in his own leather chair, tossing a combat knife into the air and catching it with terrifying ease. She told him that his medals were a lie and his academy was a graveyard. She had already uploaded his entire server, every bank account, every illegal contract, and every video of his training sessions to the Department of Defense. Sterling tried to draw a hidden pistol, but Ruth was faster. She pinned his hand to the desk with the knife before he could even squeeze the trigger. As the sun began to rise over the frozen mountain, the sound of heavy-lift military helicopters filled the air. The real army had arrived. The elite cadets and their corrupt instructors were led out in zip ties, their faces pale with a mixture of cold and shame. Brock was carried out on a stretcher, his ribs broken and his career over. Commander Sterling was led away in heavy chains, his empire reduced to a pile of digital evidence. The boy, Leo, was safe, being treated by military medics who looked at the janitor with a level of respect they usually reserved for generals. Ruth didn't stay for the debriefing. She had already changed back into a plain flannel shirt and jeans. She handed the master encryption key to a waiting colonel, gave him a crisp salute that revealed her true rank, and walked toward a black SUV waiting by the perimeter fence. To the world, she was still a nobody. She would go to another location, another low-level job, and wait for the next shadow to grow too long. As she drove away from Eagle Ridge, the mountain finally fell silent. The janitor was gone, but the legend of the woman who cleaned up the trash, both on the floors and in the boardrooms, would be whispered for decades. She was the ghost of the ridge, and she had proven that the most dangerous weapon in the world isn't a gun. It's a person everyone thinks they can ignore. If you enjoyed this story of justice and hidden power, hit that subscribe button to join our community and never miss a mission. We bring you the best underestimated hero stories every week. Thanks for watching.